today's topic is spoken data and the CRITT TPR-DB. And for this, we thanks very much to Fang Jia and Long Hui Zhou. We worked a little bit in the past couple of days to recapture what we did many years ago, 7 years, how many? 5 years ago or so. We collected some site interpretation with text when I had a job in Renmin University, and it was a quite sophisticated setup with spoken and reading data and so on. And we want to talk about this, how we set this up and how we recorded the data and how we analyzed the data. And so we start today with, so there's actually 4 parts. So I will give a short introduction to the technology, how we, what technologies we use to record the spoken data. And then Feng Jia in China, she is right now in Beijing. She will talk about the setup of that experiment, how she required those participants of that study and so on. And then Long Hui will talk about the evaluation of the data that we only did a couple of months ago. And it's a quite fresh paper that is this one here. It's in the list of references. It's this one here, Trados. No, this one here. Patterns of attention and quality in English-Chinese simultaneous interpreting with text. And it's an open journal, so you can download this from here, or you can also go to the CRITT website and get it from there. So it is, which one here? This under publications on the CRITT website. I think if you click here, you should be able to immediately download this file. And so, yeah, so that describes basically the study that we want to talk about today and the technology that we used and produced for this study, and which is partially still available. Okay, so I will start with an introduction to the set of to this kind of new mode of translation. So until now we talked about written translation, today about spoken translation, and there are actually different ways to do this. So we can have here you can see this, right? We can have here spoken translation can be interpretation, which, oh, why isn't it updated? Which can be, so we have a spoken input that the interpreter will hear some input through the ears and then speak out the translation. That would be an interpretation process, and that can be simultaneous or consecutive. Simultaneous would be if the translator speaks while they hear the input. So it's a quite exhausting and difficult task. So they need to have 2 channels, an input channel with a source language and an output channel where they speak, and they do this at the same time, so with a gap of a couple of seconds. Or this interpretation can be consecutive, means there's a couple of seconds, maybe a minute or so, the speaker would produce a text, and then the translator would translate, give an account of what was said in the source language, in the target language, and that can be more or less summarizing the input. So this would be one mode where we have a spoken input and spoken output. And then we have another mode where we have side translation, which is when a translator reads a text and speaks out the translation. So this will also be often a kind of simultaneous in the sense that they might not know, they often do not know the text. So, but of course they can read back and forth in the text because it's on a paper or on a screen, so they can read and they can have a little bit more freedom of the time they can use to produce the spoken output. But then, so the output will be spoken. Or we have a mixture of these two, which is sight interpretation with text, where actually a translator has two input modes. They have an input via the ears with the spoken language, and at the same time they can see the text on a screen or on a sheet of paper, and so and they produce a spoken output. All these modes are the same in the sense that the output is a spoken target text, but the input can then either be spoken, so auditory input through the ears, or through a text, reading a text, or they can have both modes of input, spoken and input. And I have been told that this is not very uncommon for speeches given, for instance, by politicians. They often do not improvise their speeches. They have some kind of a text, and these texts are sometimes given shortly before they start speaking, given to the interpreters, and so they have these two modes available, the written version and document, and then the spoken version of the speaker, of the politician, for instance. And so the text can be more or less identical to what is spoken, and depends very much on the speaker, I guess, to the spoken input, but this is usually in a real scenario not really the case, and also our interpreters didn't really know this. We did tell them. Anyway, so how did we do this? How did we record the data, and how did we add this data to the database? And the crucial thing is here the recording process, the recording of the spoken data. So we used Audacity, which I will show in a moment. Audacity can replay or play a sound tape, so can play the source text speech, for instance, and can record at the same time. So this is very nice. So an interpreter would then put on a headset, which they would do anyway, I think, and hear through the through the headset the spoken input, so the source signal, and speak out through the microphone the output, and this would be recorded simultaneously with Audacity. Now, what we did, we also had this person then reading the text, so he had a second input, and this was then simulated with a translog. So that we had at the same time translog at on the screen, where the person could only see the source text, and we had an eye tracker also attached to it, so we could see where on the screen the translator reads what on the screen, which part of the words they read, while they would hear the input. So we will talk about this in much more detail today and tomorrow. And then we had this spoken signal from Audacity. We used a speech recognition system from Watson, IBM Watson. So that is a speech recognition system that produces also a timestamp for each word that was produced. There's quite a few speech recognition, voice recognition systems available, but none of them. This was the only one that produces a timestamp for each word that it would recognize. So I produced a small interface, a small program here, WAV to tab, a Python program, which would then read the input file, the WAV file that was produced here by Audacity, and produce an output for each word. I will show this in a moment. And then, of course, there is speech recognition problems or errors and so on. And then we used Elan, which is another open source platform, a very sophisticated program. I will briefly show this to correct wrong transcriptions of this audio signal. Then we convert these transcribed audio signals into the TPR format, TPR-DB format, and there's another script called FKS merge PL. And this output of this program would then be could then be uploaded to the database where we align the source and the target words and have these tables and analyze the tables, as we already have discussed for a couple of times in this couple of sessions recently. So we have a number of software packages. We had Translog 2 that was to record how the translator or the interpreter reads the source text on the screen. We had Audacity to replay the source signal and also record the spoken signal. We had a voice recognition, automatic speech recognition system, Watson 2, that works on the cloud. And we have a small interface program here, WAV2 WAV2Tab Python script. Then we used Elan, which is another software package to correct the gaze-to-speech synchronization, and once, okay, there's one small script missing here to generate actually the format that is compatible with the TPR-DB format, and we uploaded this then. So Audacity looks like this. I will show in a moment. I will give another demonstration. So it has a large. One can have, I think, any number of tracks here, and these are each of those are mono tracks. And you can see here the waveform signal, and this is the source speech, and we have an English minister coming to Japan, giving a very high-ranking speech in a very sophisticated environment, political environment, and so on. So this was a speech that was recorded, and so we can replay it here. And down here, this is a recording of the interpreting signal. So that the interpreter would hear this signal and would speak the translation, and this would be recorded down here. I will show this in a moment, how that can be set up. And then the output of this would produce we can export this data in the form of WAV files, then transcribe this and upload this to Elan, and Elan looks like this. So it has a number of tracks. So these are tracks down here, and you can also even see the clips, the video. So actually this translation that we did, this experiment, was from a clip, but we didn't show the video. We showed the source text instead. So the interpreter couldn't see this video here, but it could see the transcription of the text. So here Elan looks like this. We have here, as you can see, a sound track, and I think this might be the source text, the English source text. This would be the interpreted signal, and in this case, it was interpreted into Japanese, as you can see with these characters up here. And then we have the transcription of these two streams here, which is the upper one, I think, is the English, the English words, these ones here, and the lower part here, this audio signal is the Japanese part, and you can see this transcription of this, and you can also see that all these tracks are synchronized, right? So we have a timestamp here, and we have, of course, so the interpreter would lag behind in time because a couple of seconds, no? But these transcriptions here would correspond to the English source text and to the Japanese translation here. And then you can see that we have some kinds of meta annotation. For instance, here is hesitation and so on. So we will talk about this in a moment. So this would serve us to post-edit the signal and to add punctuation marks and so on. Okay, so then I will go through these different kinds of modes that we had. We had interpretation mode that was audio only. So we have load. So the instructions would be something like this: load the speech into Audacity, connect the headset, then type Shift record to record the spoken output. And so this, by typing this, this command here, the speech, the source text would be replayed, and Shift record would then record the output of the speaker. And once the whole file is through, the interpreter would stop that recording process, save these WAV files, then we would, the researcher then, I guess, would use the speech recognition system, upload this to Elan, convert into this translog format, and upload this to the TPR-DB. So we have here only spoken language. In this case, we have sight interpretation, which is a little bit, so which has the two modes, right? The written text, which is read, and the output, which is spoken. So we start Audacity, then we open translog. So Audacity would already be running, and then open translog, and then load the project and calibrate the eyes if an eye tracker is connected. Then start the voice recognition in Audacity, then start translog. And then we have here, so we have basically two independent programs, Audacity here and translog on the other hand. And if we want to synchronize the gaze data with the spoken signal, so then we need to invent a trick, because the gaze data is recorded in translog, which has a different clock from that of Audacity. And in order to synchronize, to know at what point we can synchronize these two streams of data, we had this trick. We type up, we type the up key on the keyboard. This keystroke would be recorded in translog, and the interpreter would say up at the same time. So up is quite short, and then we would type the interpreter would, as everything pops up, right? So right in the beginning of the session, they would say up while at the same time pressing this up keystroke. And this means we have this, we have the spoken signal up, recorded by Audacity, and we have the keystroke up in translog. And with these keystrokes and voice recognition, we could synchronize the two streams of data. Okay, so I will show this in a moment. So then, once we are at this point, the sight interpreter would read the file or the source text on the translog window, while the gaze is tracked what they read, and then speak the translation, then stop the translog and save the XML file, and stop the recording with the Audacity, and then we would have again this WAV file. We have a way of synchronizing the two, the WAV file and the translog file, and we could then upload this later then to the TPR-DB. So this is the sight interpretation mode. And then we have this third mode, which is sight interpretation with text, which is actually a mixture, which is the most complex architectures or settings of this. So it's a mixture of this interpretation and sight translation settings. So we have this interpretation, which is a source voice and a target voice, and we have sight translation, which is a source text and the target voice. So the voice is here the same on the target side, but the two input channels are the same, are different. So one's voice through the headset and text through the eyes in translog. So two inputs, eye and ear, and one output voice. So now I would like to briefly show how this Audacity looks like. For those who have not seen this, so this is Audacity. It's for free. One can download this for free. We can open a file here. So we had in this session, we had it was one speech but this was chopped up into several smaller parts so that it is better digestible for our experimental settings. So it was one coherent speech chopped up into several parts, and actually the speech was longer than these 6. Each of those WAV files is about 1 minute, so we can load this. And as you can see here, it is a stereo. It has 2 channels. We can, I think, where was it? We can split the stereo into mono. So now they are independent, and we can delete this upper voice. So we have a 1 mono channel here with the spoken signal, and now we can press Shift, and it makes this funny triangle here, and press the left mouse key, and then immediately, as you can see, I think you cannot hear remotely, you cannot hear this. We can immediately hear the speaker of the source signal, and here you can see my voice as it is recorded. Now an interpreter would have a headset, right, and speak out the translation of what they hear here. But you can see that this is simultaneously recorded, right, with my voice. And so if we stop eventually, then the idea is, or as a consequence, all these timestamps are exactly synchronized here on the source and the target side. Okay, so I just click here for stop, and then I can go back and replay this. And now as you can see, we hear, and I've been told that you cannot hear this, but we hear and both signals mixed up with my third voice on top. Very funny. Okay, so you get the idea. So you can now save these 2 files individually and upload this to the Elan. First send it to a speech recognition system, and then send it to Elan. So, okay, so here we have Audacity, and here we have the speech recognition system. And what we used is this IBM Watson. One needs to get a key for this tool, and then we had a little script WAV to tap, where they have a number of language models here. As you can see, Arabic, then different kinds of English, UK English and US English. I don't know what US or UK English it would be. Anyway, there's a choice of different types of English, then Spanish, French, Japanese, Brazilian, Portuguese, and Chinese, and then different broadband. I think refers to the number of bits or the sampling rate of the recording. So we would use this tool to transcribe this WAV file into, in this case, Japanese, and then there's a user and a password that you could, that I just showed here on the previous slide. You can get it from the cloud. And this file, if successful, would produce a file called same root ASR.txt, and the output would look like this. So this is for Chinese. We have the language pair here, the language Chinese here. This would be the start time as in the WAV file that comes from Audacity. So this would be the start time and the end time, and this would be the word that was recognized. And in this case, this word here would be about 220 milliseconds. So the difference between these 2 timestamps. And so we have a sequence of words that is recognized here with their beginning and end times. And then we could upload this. So we have actually 2 language pairs in English and the Chinese, and the English would also have timestamps. And this could then be uploaded to Elan, as you can see here, for instance. This is the Japanese file. So this is the starting point, and there seemed to be some noise in the beginning of that file that was detected as some kind of a signal, as a word here, and Elan would then, we could upload this this audio and the transcription into Elan, which would make it much easier because we have already synchronized the speech signal and the transcription of it. And then this process, one can replay this in Elan here and see whether the signal that is here actually is what the transcription indicates here. And in this case, it would be just a noise, something, and one could then insert here with metadata in square bracket that it's a kind of a noise. And then a little bit later here, we have this up signal, means that here the interpreter said up, and you remember he said up and pressed at the same time the up keystroke, and then this would then be transformed into square brackets up, so that we can know in the process later that this is here our synchronization timestamp. So this timestamp here, whenever whatever it is, when this up was set, would then coincide with the timestamp in translog where we see this up keystroke, right? Okay, so this would be for post-editing of this spoken signal, and here we can see that we can annotate noise, hesitation in different forms in square brackets here. We can add punctuation marks. The speech recognition system does not add punctuation marks. Some are there that add, but this Watson did not, at least not at this time. So we can have different kinds of conversation conventions. What would be noise, what would be hesitation, and so on, so that we can later detect this in the analysis. This file then would be exported, and it would just have the same format as the one that I showed here, but only with the corrected words. And if you like to, you could also, of course, adjust the timestamps here in Elan. And this would then be merged, taken. So we have in our setting here, we had a site translation session. So we have a translog file that we already looked into, right? With the gaze data, listed the gaze data and the fixations and so on. So this would be the translation data from the translog session. This would be the transcribed text, the output from the speech recognition system, and then we would produce an output in this merged, where these two streams would be merged, a little bit similar to what we saw yesterday, where we merged the input log file and the translog file. Here we merged the translog file, which has gaze data in this case, and the speech recognition or the speech transcription file, and we would produce a third output file which contains the two merged streams by indicating here the source and the target languages. Okay, so this was my part of this presentation. Now I hope that Fang Jia is here and can talk about how we got these translators to do this task, and what the text was like and all this. So the setup of this experiment, and after this, Longhui will talk about the evaluation of the data.
I will go ahead to explain the experimental setting we have done together. So my part is actually quite short, and the highlight of the speech will be the technique Michael introduced, and also the data analysis Long Hui is going to share in a few minutes. Okay, so well, as just now Michael explained, we are very lucky to have Michael working with us in Renmin University of China. So during that period of time, we tried to do some experiments together. And this experiment I'm going to explain is done in 2018 when we had Michael here in Beijing. So, and later, actually, that data laid there idle for some time, and luckily, Long Hui picked it up and just refreshed all the things and working together with Michael to make the data more valuable. So I'm going to explain some details of the experimental setting, and we'll leave the data analysis to Long Hui. Well, so first of all, I'm going to explain the task. In our experiment, we did simultaneous interpreting with text. So here, let me explain a bit, because for simultaneous interpreting with text, sometimes in the literature, people refer to that also as sight interpreting with text. So they are the same, the task, but they may be referred to in different ways. And in our experimental setting, we do L1 translation, that is from English to Chinese. And each participant did 6 tasks. And we tried our best to recruit professional interpreters. So we recruited 9 professionals in total with very high remuneration, I should say. And among them, there are 2 males and 7 females. All of them were graduates from one of the world's top interpreter training program based in the United States. And you all know that it's at Monterey. So they are all graduates from here. So all of them received formal training in interpreting and graduated from that prestigious institution. And all of them were professional interpreters. So on average, their professional practice was 6.4 years. And all of them had L1, Chinese as L1 and English as L2. So here I'd like to say a little bit more about our experimental material, because we also struggled a lot when we picked experimental material, as this is a common case for people doing translation process research, right? So in order to make the experimental authentic, or to ensure the validity of our design, we chose one authentic political speech. And that means it's just the authentic audio file. We didn't ask someone to record it afterwards. And then we just divide this political speech into 6 segments for each task. And that 6 segments were used in its natural order. That is, we didn't randomize the order because we want to make the task very natural, okay? And the 6 segments were of comparable length, around 150 words, and the audio is around 1 minute. I will show you some more details about that later. So because we are doing SI with text, so that is to say we had a live audio recording played through headphones, and also we showed them the corresponding scripts. And as Michael rightly pointed out, this may not be the real world scenario, because our corresponding scripts were the verbatim scripts, that is the exact same words spoken in the live audio. So, but in the real situation, the corresponding scripts may be very different from what the speaker really delivered. But this is, I mean, we picked one form of that, but in the future, I think we can try to look into the two situations. Like one situation is to have the exact verbatim word-to-word scripts. The other is to just to modify the audio recording and to see the difference. This is a very interesting topic, but we haven't done that yet. So here is a demo of the script. As you can see, it's a very typical political speech. And this segment is around 152 words. And here are some more details of the 6 segments. As you can see, the number of words, we tried our best to make it comparable, but not exactly the same. This is the same situation for the length of the audio file, because as you all know, when we cut the segment, we need to make that segment self-contained. That is to say, we cannot cut at 1 minute exactly if the speaker is not finishing one sentence or is in the middle of speaking something. So in order to make it self-contained and the meaning is quite complete for each segment, we tried to make it around 1 minute, okay? And this is how it looks. Well, and also again to simulate the real world situation, we allowed the interpreters to do some preparation. First of all, we gave them background knowledge. On the right side of the screen, as you can see, this is the background knowledge we gave to the interpreters, which included who the speaker was, where the speech was delivered, like in Japan, and what the conference was, as well as the main idea of the speech. And this is like the real situation, right? When you come to a conference and you will be briefed about these information. In addition to the background knowledge, we also gave the interpreter glossary. As you can see, these glossaries include some proper nouns and especially some difficult noun phrases. And this was done based on our pilot study. We interviewed our participants during the pilot study and collected the difficult words and expressions. Another thing I'd like to explain is that we did not give the glossary all together, or we just give them glossary for each task because we don't want to give them too much pressure for their working memory or for their memory. So before they did each task, we gave them the glossary to prepare, and then we go ahead with the task. That is the second preparation, and our third preparation is to have a practice task. In the practice task, we used the very first part of the same political speech. That is the introductory part. In order to in order to help the interpreters get familiarized with the speaker, like their accent and their way of speech, as well as to have again some understanding of what the speaker is going to talk about. So I will try to play part of the audio file for you. I don't know whether you can hear it. Maybe you can give me some feedback. So here I will just play a few seconds.
Freedom, democracy, rule of law, open markets and free trade are all natural concepts to both Australians and Japanese, and that helps make us natural partners. We look instinctively to each other to respond to a range of regional crises.
Right, so this is...
We can hear, but there was an echo.
Okay. Okay, right. Luckily, you can hear. I made it. Okay, I was worried whether you can hear it. Okay. Anyway, so you get the feeling how the speech is. It's very typically it's a very typical political speech. Okay, and it's clear. Okay, right. And then about the techniques, I guess I don't need to explain again because Michael did a very thorough explanation before, including some of the most difficult part, like those scripts thing. Okay, so but here again, I'd like to emphasize one thing, that is we use Audacity for two purposes. One is to play the audio, that is the audio like I played just now, but the participant listened to that through the headset. And Audacity was used to record the production, that's the interpreting output. Okay, right, so I will just go to next page. Well, so after the 6 tasks, one preparatory task plus 6 tasks, well, actually for each task, immediately after they finished interpreting, we ask them to fill in the NASA task load index, like what you can see here, to ask them to evaluate their cognitive load, their effort, and also to evaluate their own performance, and as well as their frustration. So this is what we have done basically. And this is the last page. Well, I'd like to say a little bit of the data set. So maybe you are already familiar with the 2 data sets. We have the 2 data sets which resulted from the experiment. It is because the CRITT TPR-DB TPR-DB form or platform can only allow 2 sources of data at the same time. For our SI with text, we actually have 3 sources of data, namely ear, eye, and voice. So because of the data format, we had to split them into 2 data sets. One contained our ear data, that is the input data, as well as the output voice data. And the other data set, they are twins, I would say, contains our reading data, that's our eye data, as well as the output data. Okay, so that's all about the experimental setting, and thanks. And I will just give the floor to Longhui. If you have any questions, you are welcome to ask.
I do have one question, Feng.
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you for your very clear explanation. I just want to be really clear. The reason to fragment the original speech into 6 segments is primarily due to the limitation of the eye tracker ability to handle a certain amount of space on the screen, I suppose? Is that the main reason?
Yes, yes. I'm sorry, I don't know who is speaking, but I hear it very clearly. So I will just answer the question. As you may well remember, as Michael explained, we used Translog 2 to display the text. And Translog, in a Translog 2 session, usually if you use the the font and the space setting according to the regular practice, the maximum number of words is around 150. Because you don't want to make the words, the font too small, and usually we double space the text. Otherwise, the eye data may get kind of noisy or messy. I hope I have answered your question.
Okay, yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah.
I also do have a question, if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
It is about the NASA task load index you touched briefly. Can you say a bit more about that? I'm very curious to hear how it can be used.
You can see the slide, right?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, so this this task load is actually adapted by Professor Sun Sanjun, also from China, and this is done in his PhD study. He was a PhD student also in Kent State University. I guess his supervisor is Shreve, right? Am I right, Michael? Anyway, so
you can ask.
Yes.
yes, thank you. So it's related to Kent State University, but actually this NASA task load index, as its name explained, it is used by NASA originally to give to the pilots to assess their mental load or task load. But the original questionnaire had like more questions, but Professor Sun just adapted it into several less questions in order to make it more compatible with the setting of translation and interpreting. And this is like how he adapted it. And after he introduced this one to translation studies, I guess a lot of researchers started using it and trying to use the index or the results of those constructs to correlate with the process measures, like the self-evaluated cognitive load with the so-called more objective measures like average fixation duration or pause or total fixation duration, etc. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Yeah. Okay.
Hello, Professor Feng.
Hi.
Hi, can I? Yes, I have one question regarding IBM Watson as the ASR tool to be combined with Translog. I mean, how did it work? Do you mean that when you open Translog and open IBM, they will automatically be combined, or was there any particular setup?
Okay, thank you for your question. Well, I will try to answer this question, but Michael is the expert. So if I am not clear, please correct me or add things, Michael, okay? Yeah, so if I'm if I remember correctly, the IBM Watson server is used after we finish collecting data. So that is not that is to say the IBM Watson server does not run simultaneously with Translog 2. So we just collect data with Translog 2, Audacity, and Toby. And then we just use the IBM Watson server to automatically like to transcribe the audio file, the output for us, together with a very accurate timestamp, because we can use other things to transcribe it for us, like a lot of free apps. But this IBM Watson server can provide the exact timestamp, and that is what we need for further correlating our output data with the input data, like the reading and also the listening. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So maybe I took it the wrong way. I thought the transcript the interpreter was reading was transcribed by the IBM server. So it was not that.
But you are right. You are right. You can use the IBM server to transcribe that. Yeah, it's just like if you use it for that purpose, it's just like any other free transcription app.
Okay,
yeah.
but as you mentioned or clarified, actually in your study, IBM server was used afterwards. So how about the transcript that was presented in Translog? Was that presented like a self-paced presentation?
Oh, you mean to...
During interpreting, the interpreters were reading the transcript while interpreting simultaneously, right?
Yes. So
Yes.
that is to say we
Yeah.
present the whole passage to the...
All at once or sentence by sentence? All at once.
No, not sentence by sentence. I know what you mean. You mean because inside translation training, sometimes we do that. We call it drip fed or something. Like you give, you present one sentence and ask the student to side translate that sentence, and then you present the next one. But for our experiment setting, we don't do that. We didn't do that. We just present the whole passage, like the interpreter got the script or the notes from the speaker. Yeah.
But yeah, okay, but without any prior preparation on this script, right?
Yes, they did have preparation, like I mentioned. They had three kinds of preparation: the background knowledge, vocabulary, as well as the. Do you mean the reading, the orientation reading?
No, I mean the text. You normally in the real interpreting scenario, sometimes the interpreters could get the whole text before interpreting, and they can have like 3 or 5 minutes to go through the text.
Yes.
But in your experiment, it was simulated in a way that they got it right before the interpreting.
Yes, you are right.
Okay.
Yeah. But I think what you mentioned is another possible setting, and it is, it is also a very good setting. But in our experiment, we didn't allow them time to read the scripts beforehand, right?
Yes, and I think maybe in the future, you can consider doing that kind of experiment with also possibility given to the interpreters to maybe take notes on the script. I think in that case, that might be more closer to the real setting of interpreting.
That's true.
Sometimes in certain cases, Yeah.
I totally agree. I totally agree. But again, this is because of the technological constraints.
Yeah, totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah, as you know, we used translog to present it. So yeah, and to allow notes is another technical challenge.
Yeah, maybe in need of a writing pad or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that is a good idea. Like you had another pad and then you write it.
Yeah. Yeah, because as interpreters, we do have to write and take
Yeah.
notes. Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor
That's
Koh.
brilliant. Yeah, I guess that's a very good idea. And also, I guess you mentioned chunking, right?
Yes,
especially
chunking
inside
is critical. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like Jill recommended us to do that, to chunk
Yes.
before we start translate, right? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, and also sorry, Professor Feng, another follow-up question. You mentioned at the time of your study, IBM server was used because it was the only ASR tool to be able to produce timestamp. So I'm wondering, as technology develops, right now, are there any other tools that can also produce timestamp? Or do we still have to rely on IBM?
I guess Michael is the person to answer this question.
All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you anyway.
Michael, yes, I'll give it to Michael. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not updated with respect to this, but I guess you can figure this out by searching a little bit. So we can maybe go on with Longhui's presentation of evaluation of the results.
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, so I want to first test the sharing screen stuff. Can you see I'm sharing the screen now?
Yes.
You can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So thanks for Michael and Jiafeng's explanation about the technology and the procedures for collecting the data. And now I want to share with you our recent research. Using these data sets, just now, Jiafeng has explained how difficult we collected the data, and Michael has also explained how difficult is the technology stuff. And then I'll do some easier stuff, maybe, just to analyze the data. And this is the collaboration between Kent State University and Renmin University of China. And our paper is entitled Patterns of Attention and Quality in English to Chinese Simultaneous Interpreting with Text. And here is what they are talking about just now is the experimental design. And why I'm drawing the picture of this, because I think it's better to visualize like this. I remember when Michael was explaining to me how they collected data, he always draw this triangle on the whiteboard in our lab. And he is trying to say there are two inputs of the information for the participant to collect, to acquire the information from the source text. The first channel is the participant would hear the source text in English via the headset. And the second channel is the participant would read the source text in English via translog screen. And also it's the eye movement is also collected via translog and Toby. So here we can see there are actually two modes of interpreting in this data sets. as just now Jiafeng has explained, we have one data set is actually the same as simultaneous interpreting data set. So there is an audio input and there is an audio output, and this is captured by Audacity, and we can get ear voice band from this data set. And another data set is as the mode of side translation, as we always see. So the translator would see the written text on the screen, and then they speak the target text in Chinese. So there is an I voice band involved in this, and we can also analyze it, but they are in different data sets now in this study. And here I want to first explain what is ear voice band, eye voice band, and ear eye span, because we use the 3 spans in this study. And just now I mentioned there are actually 3 types of interpreting involved in this data. So the first one is simultaneous interpreting, and we can get ear voice band. I just plot the audio input and the audio output on this progression graph. As you can see, it's the same data set, but we can see only the audio input in the orange circle and the audio outputs in the black characters. So this is what the translator here as the orange circles with the emergence of time. And this one, this stream in black characters, is the audio output of the translators. Yeah, it's also with the emergence of time, and also both of these streams of data is actually kind of linear, because we can say in this special mode of simultaneous interpreting with text, it's mostly simultaneous interpreting, because the participant hear the audio, so they are actually externally paced by the audio pace. So they kind of need to follow the pace of the audio input. That's why the audio output is also linear with the time. So here we get the ear voice band. What we say about ear voice band is, for example, we draw a horizontal line from here as the index number of the source text as 22, maybe here. So we can see the left side is the orange circle, which means the participant first hear the source text. Here, here the participant first hear the source text at the timestamp of about 12,000 milliseconds, and then afterwards at about 14,000 milliseconds, the participant said or speak the audio output of the same source text word. So this we can see is the ear voice band, means the participant take at least maybe 4 seconds to produce the translation of this specific word of the source text into target text. So this is the ear voice band. We calculate by the gap, the gap in terms of time, of course, between the participant hear the source text and the participant speaks the target text. And this is there is a line of research about simultaneous interpreting. They use ear voice band. And another kind of span is called eye voice band. And there's another line of research about side translation. They always use this kind of indicator, eye voice band. So we can see here in this paragraph, in this graph, it's the same text and same session. It's just I only plot the fixations and the spoken output on the same graph, on the progression graph. So here the blue dots is the fixations of the participant in terms of time always. And then the black characters is the spoken output of the participant, also in terms of time. And we can also take the same index number of the source text as 20. We can see here. For example, there is a fixation here. That is the first fixation of the participant on this source text. That means the first time the participant read we, right? The first time the participant read we is at maybe about 4,000 milliseconds. And when does he produce the spoken output is we also draw a horizontal line here. As we can see from here, then he produced the character 我, which should be woman, right? Yes, it's woman. In Chinese means we. So he first read it at 4,000 milliseconds, and then he produced the translation at maybe 14,000 milliseconds. That means he takes approximately 10 seconds between he reads this source word on the screen and he speaks the translation output. Yes, so here we get the I voice band is between the first time he fixated on the source word and then he produced the translation of the same source word, the time distance. And we get this two span very common in recent research about interpreting. The ear voice band is about simultaneous interpreting, and I voice band is always about side translation. And because we have this special mode that Dr. Fong has produced, the experiment, simultaneous interpreting with text. So we get actually two inputs for the participant to get the information from the source text. That is, they get both the audio input and the written input. Then we plot both the fixations and the audio input and the spoken output on the same progression graph. Then they have the same, when we can see that when the timestamp, the same timestamp happens, what happens when the for the participant. So for example, we still get this source text index 20 also and we can see actually he first read we at about 4,000 milliseconds, as we say as the last slide, and then he hear the audio of this we at about maybe 10,000 milliseconds, and then he produced this we at 14,000 milliseconds. So this we can get a ear-eye span that is between the first time he hear this source word and the first time he read this source word. So this is from this blue dots to this orange circle. This is the ear-eye span. And this we can use for simultaneous interpreting with text for this ear-eye span because they get two inputs, both the ear and eye. So we can get this ear-eye span. This is not that normal in recent research because usually they don't have this kind of special mode of interpreting. So here is our research questions about these three spans, what we can do with these three spans. The first question is, how do interpreters distribute their attention between the auditory input and visual input? As we just said, they have two inputs at the same time. So how do they distribute their attention between these two inputs when they get both access at the same time? And then the second question is, how do interpreters vary in their attention patterns? And this we can see from our data set. We observe that there are basically 3 kinds of interpreters. The first one is called ear dominant interpreters. As we can see here, the ear dominant interpreter, their ear voice band, which is the distance between they hear the source text and they speak the translation, is much closer than the participant read the source text and speaks the target text. So here, then we can see the ear voice band is the purple thing here, and the eye voice band is the orange thing here. So the ear voice band is much shorter than the eye voice band. That means the participants use more closely to the ear channel, as we can say it, than the eye channel. Yes, so if we can see from here, it's also another example. The first time he fixated in this word peace is at 32,000 milliseconds, and the first time he speaks it's already maybe 15 seconds later. So it's a very long eye voice band, but the ear voice band between this orange circle and the black character is like half the distance between of the eye voice band. So we call this kind of interpreter ear dominant interpreter, and we see that in our data set there are 4 participants fall into this category. And then the second type of interpreter, we call them eye dominant interpreter. It's on the contrary of the ear dominant interpreter. The distance between the first time they read the source text and speaks the target text is much shorter than the distance between they listen to the source text and speaks the target text. We also take the same segment and the same source text as an example. If we can see from here, the ear voice band is this purple thing, and the eye voice band is this orange thing. We can see that the eye voice band is very close, and for the whole streams, we can see that almost the fixations and the spoken outputs are sometimes even close to each other, very much to merge to each other actually. And for this type of interpreter, we think they rely more on their written text. As we can see, I also draw a vertical line here. There is a very, very interesting case here for this segment, because this segment, I chose it as an example because this segment is very long. It's about 40 characters or 40 tokens in English, and it's for, as Dr. Feng has explained, a whole session is about 150 words, and for this single segment, it's already 40 words. It's extremely hard for the participants' work memory and for them to follow the pace of the source text in audio. And we can see here, as I draw the line here at 56,000 milliseconds, the audio input is already stopped, right? Here is the period, and this orange circle is the audio input. So at here, the timestamp 56,000 milliseconds, the audio input already stopped for this segment, but the participants' fixations in blue dots still move around from actually the beginning of this second little clause and until the end of the this segment for almost 10 seconds after the audio stopped. And the fixations continues, and also the spoken output continues with the fixations, as we can see. And then what we can see from here, we assume that this, for this part at least, the participants cannot have the audio input because it's already stopped the tape. And then the participant continued working on the translation with the written source text on the screen, because the fixation is still go with the flow, with the time, and also the spoken output also continues with the flow of time, and they kind of coincide with the time. So we can assume that this kind of I-dominant interpreter, they rely more on the I channel or written input. And the last type of interpreter is, we call it eye-ear balancing interpreter. We can see that for this kind of interpreter, their eye voice band and ear voice band is always close to each other, not that different. For example, we see from this graph, the orange circle is still the audio input. The blue circle, the blue dots is the fixations, and the black characters is the spoken output. They are basically at the same distance with each other. We call this kind of interpreter eye-ear balanced interpreter, because we think for this kind of interpreter, they rely on both channels. They get information from both the written input and the audio input at the same time. And also, just now, Michael and Dr. Feng has explained, we think that ideally this kind of interpreter is the best example for simultaneous interpreter, because sometimes in the conference interpreting setting, the transcript they gave the interpreter in advance will not be the same as the speaker's real speech. If the interpreter can pay attention to both channels, that would maybe work better for the purpose of the conference interpreting, if there are any incongruence between the written source text and the audio source text. And here we draw a joint plot based on the ear voice band and eye voice band of the whole data set. As we can see here on the upper side of this joint plot is the histogram of the eye voice band of all the participants of all sessions. We can see that it's kind of skewed, and the ear voice band is kind of on average 4,000 milliseconds. That means usually the speaker, the translator needs at least on average 4 seconds to produce a translation after they hear the source text in audio. And then here on the right side is the histogram of the eye voice band, and is kind of evenly distributed, and the distribution of eye voice band is very different from the ear voice band. That means people's eye voice band vary a lot among all our participants. And here on the middle of this joint plot is the correlation between the eye voice band and ear voice band. We can see that on the level of the whole data set, there is not much correlation between the eye voice band and ear voice band. But later, if we go deep into individual participant, we can see there is some correlation or relationship. And here's the distribution of the ear eye span, because we want to know what is the most predominant channel for most participants in our data set or for our experimental setting. We see that, as we can see from this histogram, we calculated the mean of the ear eye span is minus 4,400 milliseconds. This means basically for most of our participants, they have ear-lead eye trend. That means they first hear the source text and then they fixated on the source text for the information acquisition, for their translation performance. Yes, I think that's for my part. If you have questions, feel free to ask me.